I look forward to the forum that'll take place, because it's a gathering of different humanitarian organizations. And what I'd really like to tell those organizations is that in this day and time when climate change is rampant and its consequences are felt keenly by communities all across the world, and mostly in Africa where I come from, it's time that they partner up. It's time that they actually get together to try to figure out how to best put to use climate science and make it relevant to help them do their work, to help them get to those communities that need the help, and to help them deliver.
What is missing in terms of the collection of climate data and the value of that to people at the end, the farmer, the fisherman, not just the agriculturalist, but the economists? I mean, all those people who have to take decisions on behalf of humanitarian groups and vulnerable people.
Well, the people at the front lines, as we like to call them, those people need climate information to be able to better decide. Do I evacuate? Do I not? When a flood is coming? Do I send the children to their grandparents' home on a hill, or do I not? When you know that a disaster is coming on their way. So that's the essential value of climate information to those people that are experiencing the effects of rising climate disasters.
And are people getting access to that sort of information?
Whatsoever. Information that's available at the international levels and even at the regional levels never really trickle down to those end users at the front lines, as I said, that need this information.
Why is that? Is that a failure of government?
It's a failure of all the different participating parties. It's a failure of the governments that don't even know such information exists. In that sense, it's just a failure of ignorance. But most of all, it's a failure of two main parties, as I see it. Climate scientists that produce this wonderful information and that don't see to it that end users get it.
Well, can they be responsible for getting their information to the people?
No, they're not mandated to do so, and that's a key point. That's why I think as well it's also the fault of humanitarian organizations that are mandated to actually be at the rescue and at the bedside of communities during disasters. Those humanitarian organizations today need to know how to work better, need to know to not be just reactive but actually previsionary and actually working in ex-ante mode. Those humanitarian organizations today have the mandate to go and reach out to climate scientists and try to use the information they provide.
Is it not a little naive of you to think that people in the front line could even understand climate data? I frankly don't think I could understand a climate data model.
That's a good point. It's been tried before. We have several researchers that have been on the ground providing climate information. I can name a few. Tony Pat is one of them, who's been in Zimbabwe for 5 years and then tried to take the seasonal forecast produced by the Regional Outlook Forum for the region and transfer that seasonal forecast information to farmers, literally at the front lines in 4 different regions of Zimbabwe. That experience was telling in many, many ways, and I think inspired a whole generation of people trying to make climate information applied. I think it's not naive at all, but I believe on the opposite is that if delivered properly within the context of a trust relationship and repetitively, people are very smart at the front lines. And because it can make their lives better, inform their decisions, they will actually listen to the information if it's relevant. Now the challenge is on climate scientists to make that information relevant, to make that information concise, legible, and salient enough so that people at the front lines find it useful. Otherwise, they will simply not use it.
And maybe for the climate scientists, the problem is they don't really know what sort of information in their possession is required by people on the ground.
Precisely, another very key point. There's a gap. That's the image I use to describe the current situation. And the gap basically has on one end of the gap or the hill, it has climate scientists who deliver beautiful forecasts, wonderful information that's potentially useful, but they don't know who would use it. They don't have a counterpart on this end. And on this end, you have the users. Humanitarians is one group, decision makers in general and policy makers, farmers, people on the end, at the front lines that could potentially benefit from the information they provide, but in most cases they don't even know this exists.
And let's be honest, this information could make the difference between life and death and continued livelihoods itself.
And it has already in the past. We have an experience in West Africa with the Red Cross, whereby information about the 2008 floods made the difference and saved many, many lives during that year, relative to 1 year before when people died due to those predictable floods.
And of course, the question of money comes into it. It's going to cost to actually translate the climate data into understandable information. And will people in the front line, the farmers in West Africa, be able to buy that information?
What I like to say to respond to that point is that for me the capability already exists. These climate scientists are already producing the information. These humanitarians are already doing work to try to be at the bedside of the people on the front lines. The people on the front lines are already making decisions with or without climate information. So for me it's more a matter of connecting existing capabilities to get to a result and to get to an end using new approaches of doing things. One that is not, as I said, reactionary, but one that actually plans, prepares and anticipates.
So we need some joined up thinking between governments, the multilaterals, the scientists, and indeed the frontline users.
Very much so. And that is the big challenge of climate change. It's a big challenge, and to tackle it you need partnerships, you need dialogues.